A crucial skill for anyone managing their own company. First of all, actually, let me just ask, who would classify themselves as an entrepreneur here? Yeah, look at that. Wow, that's awesome. Very inspiring to see. Who feels fully on top of their day from an organization standpoint? Yeah, if you raise your hand, you're probably lying. Who feels completely in control of your email? Yeah, me too. Actually, there was some really great advice just a couple of minutes ago when they were talking about the sort of the 3 FUs. I apply the 3 FUs to email response as well, hence why many of you who work with me internally or externally will just get always 3 emails from me when I'm chasing things down. I think it's a good rule. But these things all compound, I think, our time and our ability to stay organized, to stay focused during our day. And the Designing Your Day workshop really has been put together to try and help you as an entrepreneur be more productive and be more effective in what you do and in terms of running your businesses. So the presentation is going to feature Anthony Mayfield. Anthony is going to be introduced by Gerard Gretsch from Nokia Growth Partners. Nokia Growth Partners is actually a sister company to Nokia, and he will be talking about Nokia Growth Partners in the enterprise tech space as a lead-in to the Designing Your Day workshop. So, Gerard, why don't you come up?
I need to go and talk, but I want a photograph. Thank you very much. I was just quickly grabbing a photograph with Jessica because I'm a big soccer fan, and yeah, exactly, soccer, football. We call it football in England, but yeah. So I wanted a photograph for my son because I was an organizer of our first under-11s football tournament at the weekend, and it was the biggest thing that I had done this year, I think. No. So thanks a lot, Toby, for the introduction. So yeah, I'm going to do the easy bit, which is really tell you a bit about Nokia's venture group, since this is a workshop about entrepreneurship. So without further ado, I'll just go straight into it. The second part of the presentation is about enterprise mobility. What I'm seeing as an entrepreneur in residence, working at Nokia's venture group, especially as things go mobile, especially as people start to do more stuff on tablets and smartphones. And then I'll hand it over to Anthony Mayfield, who is the author of this great book. And I really urge you to read it. There's some really good anecdotes about Benjamin Franklin, one of your greatest people to have come out from, well, to come from America. And there's some great tips on how to organize your day as an entrepreneur. So without further ado, I think there was a show of hands of how many people are entrepreneurs in the audience, and there was quite a few of you. And so the one thing I would say is that when and I do a lot of work. So I mentor for Techstars London, Seed Camp, the BBC Worldwide Labs. I spend a lot of time with startups. And money is one thing, but you also have to think about what other attributes you need to think about when you approach a VC. And to put it into context, when you look at NGP, we're very much about not just about the money, but we also have people on the ground in other countries, such as Europe, obviously, India, and China. And I think the reason for that, you want to think about that, is because when you have a VC that's just placed in just one place, they won't probably think as far afield as when you have people in other countries and other continents to grow your business. The other one is mobile and sector expertise. Now, there may be some VCs that you approach that have very good knowledge and area of expertise. And I think this is something that I would recommend you do. Do spend time researching the types of VCs that you're approaching and talk with authority about why you're choosing them or why you've selected them to pitch your idea. Obviously, we specialize in mobile, but that's the point. And the other thing is, companies come and ask me is like, why do I have to consider NGP to pitch my idea? And the one thing I would say, apart from the money and apart from the other 2 points I've just raised, is we have a distribution arm. So in the sense like you have crowdfunding is great at letting you know whether you have traction for your product. We will give you an idea of whether your product can get to market in all the markets that we operate in as Nokia. So the areas we specialize in, which obviously is of great interest to you, is advertising. One of our investments is Rocket Fuel, who some of you may have heard of. Enterprise mobility, we have 2 companies in that space, Cloudmark, who actually just sort of do IT in a box. So it's your whole office suite of applications in the cloud, which is great for entrepreneurs and startups looking to kind of keep costs low at the beginning. Intermedia, and then we have media and entertainment. SponsorPay is a good example where we do incentivized. It's a company that does incentivized traffic for people looking at app installs on mobile. Hardware and components, clearly Nokia being a hardware manufacturer as well as a logistics company has a special interest in this area. And one example there is Heptagon that does a lot of optics. Last week we just announced last week our 41 megapixel camera, who some of you may have heard of. The way we work with Nokia is we try and introduce these types of technologies very early on in the process. So, as much as we invest in later stage of a company, we're very interested in keeping a good relationship with very early stage companies. Heptagon is one of those examples. And finally, location and commerce. So Retail Next actually sort of does a lot of analytics for physical retail stores. So really the message here is when you're pitching to VCs, I would really urge you to do your research. Clearly that's something that you would do anyway, but just think about which sectors they specialize in, where they have people on the ground, so that when you're entering another market, you have an on-the-ground network of contacts that they can put you in touch with. So it's all about acceleration, and also getting traction for your product in other markets. So let's take an example, mobile enterprise and productivity. Now, I'm lucky enough that in London, I'm on a list with startups where we sort of share ideas, and every now and then people sort of say, I'm looking for an account expense app. Does anyone have any idea of which types of companies I should be looking at? There are lots of companies, lots of services in the cloud now that make your life a lot more efficient, a lot more effective as a company or as an entrepreneur. Take Expensify, Xero, Appointment Plus, Dropbox, Evernote. I mean, there's a stack of stuff. I really urge you to make use of those applications as they go mobile. When you look at what's happening in enterprise productivity, which may not be as sexy as B2C stuff, if you look at what's happening, it's pretty unprecedented that we're all shifting our behavior to mobile devices such as tablets and smartphones. But as you can see from the stats, it's a pretty staggering growth. And I think one thing you need to think about when you're looking at your business is your cost and how you sort of manage that over time. But what I've seen in terms of companies being as efficient as possible is putting a lot of stuff in the cloud and then being able to sort of manage a lot of their sort of business activities through the cloud via multiple devices. In terms of opportunities that we're seeing in this space, we have device and app management companies, security, CRM and mobile workforce. I mean, I'm talking about sort of fleet management, workflow management, and clearly CRM is just taken a completely different level with big data. Pretty much every company that is digital is going to be in the big data space, whether we like it or not. And so analytics will play a big part in this. And there's a lot of companies really, shifting the needle in the analytics space, in the big data space, because every digital company will be in the big data space. Employees and enterprise productivity, that pretty much speaks for itself. I was telling you about, app apps that sort of ease your expenses, ease your timesheets, whatever. There's a ton of stuff. Vertical markets. So here, healthcare, when you look at healthcare, it's very ripe for disruption in many ways. It's not just about, you know, electronic medical records. There's a number of companies that are doing a lot of stuff in easing the processes in how an industry and a vertical manages itself. And then clearly M2M, which is, that says next generation sensors. And that's of a big interest to us as Nokia, because you've all got probably Bluetooth connected devices or Bluetooth connected accessories that are this kind of size that are constantly feeding your mobile phone with data. We call those connected devices, companion devices, but the vision of a mobile phone really being the remote control to your life is coming towards us. And so I'm seeing a lot of companies moving into this space over the next 5 to 10 years who will make your life a lot more productive, a lot more efficient without you realizing it. And that's when the marriage of the physical world and the digital world will become blurred. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak about NGP. Any questions, please find me after the talk. I'll leave you with this thought. Crowdfunding, basically, and obviously that you're aware that with Kickstarter, you don't get the money until you reach a threshold, right? But there are other companies or other platforms that allow you to get the money even though you don't reach the threshold. Just be careful with that, because you're making a promise to customers, and if you can't fulfill your promise with the money that you get, then you might find it very difficult later on. But there are different models. In the UK has been very pioneering in allowing platforms where you can take a share of equity before any other country in the world. And there's a good book that I would recommend you reading, which is by NESTA, the National Endowment for Space Technology and the Arts. It's the UK's innovation agency, which I mentor for. And it's a very good book. I mean, it just gives you a lot of detail around the models, around what you need to think about as an entrepreneur. With that, I will hand over to Anthony Mayfield, who will tell you a little bit about this book that he's written, which I urge you to read. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jared. So we don't have much time together. We must move quickly. But luckily, New York is the one city in the world where I'm allowed to speak at my normal pace, which is a bit too fast in the UK and everywhere else. But everyone seems to talk like this in New York, so that's fine. We'll get through it. So one of the things we're doing with Nokia, I mean, I'm an entrepreneur, started Brilliant Noise. I work with a number of startup companies as well, so I have a lot of empathy, obviously, with sweat equity. And I guess what I'm talking today is about getting the most out of that sweat. Because we talk a lot about burn rate when we're in relation to funding. We talk about that burn rate. But I worry that we don't talk enough about the burnout rate, at which we do it ourselves. I think entrepreneurs are the same as actually every type of business culture, in that it's incredibly macho. It's incredibly like, I work 18 hours a day, I never sleep, I eat noodles, I'll give it everything, I'll give it 110%, which is not possible, but still we'll give it until we fall over. And actually, if we want to make the most of that money, we have to treat it with the same respect, energy, we have to treat it with the same respect that we do our time. So this was billed as a workshop, but I'm not going to make you do any work. Winner. Because we don't have time. But we have run a lot of workshops around this area, and it's what brought the insights out that went into this book. And I guess my mission today is to get you to actually take this home and actually read it. It distills everything that we found out, and into some other content as well, like videos about how to design your day and get more out of your time. And I want to start with a metaphor that we got actually from an organization in New York called the Neuro Leadership Group. A guy called Dr. David Rock runs that, and he kind of collates all of this, the latest ideas from neuroscience in the workplace, and tells us what it means, what we should do about it. And he says that basically in the first 10, 15 years of having cars on the road, there weren't any road signs, there weren't any highway code, there wasn't any speed limit, you could just do what you liked. And as a consequence, a lot of people who could afford cars had a lot of fun, but also there were tragic consequences. And things had to come out, norms had to emerge, rules had to emerge, structures had to emerge. It's the same with mobile devices, it's the same with this connected age. We've got these amazing sports cars for the brain, David Rock calls them, called mobile phones, which allows us access to everybody and everything in the world all of the time. It gives us supercharged cognition, which sounds fantastic and sounds like that 110% could maybe be pushed up to 125%, 150%. And that's true in a sense, but there is a cost. We have access to everything and everyone all of the time, but you can lose control. And you can suddenly come to a position where it seems like the devices and the apps and the websites and the networks are the things that are in charge. One of the questions that we always asked at the beginning of this project was when you and your phone, there's a relationship with there, when one calls, which one jumps fastest? You know, who's in charge in that relationship? You can lose control, you can get cognitive overload, you can get too much going on, you can get deluged of email inboxes, you can be distracted when you're supposed to be focused on creating a pitch, working through your strategy, working on your product. So we took two areas, took a bunch of insights and distilled them into this book. We took design thinking, which many of you will be familiar with, and we took a lot of ideas from neuroscience. So design thinking meet productivity. And this, as many of you will know, is the sort of IDEO style of thinking about design thinking. You just go into discovery mode, you define the issue, you go into an ideation mode when you're open, then you close into a prototype, then you iterate and you're open, and then you ship something. So open, closed, open, closed. And we had this really interesting question pop up. Actually, Tim Brown, one of the founders of IDEO, blogged about it, saying, design your life. And he signed off that blog post with a really interesting question: what if we treated every day as a prototype? And I suddenly realized all of these kind of lists and rule books and change your life with 7 habits or 42 rules or getting things done frameworks, all of these things feel a bit like Alcoholics Anonymous. You fall off the wagon, you get back on the wagon, you fall off it, you lose hope because you feel like a failure when it goes wrong. But actually, if you treat every day as a prototype to try and perfect your way of getting the most out of it, being the most productive, then suddenly you've got a new attitude. It doesn't matter if you fail, it doesn't matter if you start overloading on email and getting distracted by Twitter, Pinterest, whatever your dopamine-injecting poison of choice is. You can learn, you can put it into the next day. So we thought that was a good metaphor, and we thought that design your day approach would be a nice one to think about. So if we were doing a workshop, we'd start designing our day now, but we can't. We haven't got enough time. It's all in the book. If you haven't got a book, because there were just a few copies, give me a shout and I'll send you one. Anyway, so some lessons from neuroscience. Here are some of the big hits of the things that we found that we thought were so interesting. And the fascinating thing is that many of these tips you'll know from kind of productivity self-help books, but this is backed up by the science. This isn't a theory, this is backed up by what happened in the labs. So the first and most important lesson that you have to realize is that thinking is a very, very finite resource. Thinking with the prefrontal cortex is really, really intensive, and measurably so. It depletes glucose, and so as that goes, you can see it going down through the day. You can measure it in the blood sugar, and you can see how much focus and how much anybody can give their attention to something. And everything that you do that isn't habit and isn't unconscious uses up some of that glucose. And that includes dithering over which diet iced tea we're having today. That includes wondering which shoes to wear that morning. That includes just 5 minutes of Angry Birds on the metro. All of those things cost something. They literally cost you glucose, they cost you energy. So thinking is expensive. So when we block out our day in that incredibly optimistic way of back-to-back meetings and back-to-back work sessions all day, we're not being realistic because we're not looking at the other axes of planning our time, our energy. We're not putting in any breaks, we're not looking after ourselves, we're expecting that glucose to stay at 100% all day. And bad news is it's probably gone by about 11 o'clock, and then you're trying to top it up with Mars bars and donuts and whatever your glucose thing of choice, which has some unfortunate consequences. We don't have time to go into those, but... So it means that planning for your life. It means designing your whole day, not just the worky bit as well. One of the other things that we found that's really, really interesting in this age of connected always-onness is that thinking is sequential. And we like to pretend, we love to pretend that it's not. We love to pretend that we can multitask. But the science says you can't. Well, you can, but you're actually doing both tasks that you're doing, and that includes being in a meeting and doing email at the same time, at 60% of your effectiveness. So you're making that decision poorly and sending that mail poorly, and you're giving no one their due, and you need to do them in turn. So you need to do one thing at a time. We knew that already, right, but we ignored it because multitasking sounds like fun. One of my favourite consultants, Caroline Webb, who was one of the partners at McKinsey in the UK, has now formed her own coaching company, has the best way of describing this is multitasking is procrastination in disguise. And I'll actually lump a whole load of other stuff in there. Incessantly checking email and Twitter is also procrastination in disguise. You'll get a little dopamine hit every time you're doing one of those tasks, every time you're running around busy. But you get to the end of the day and try and work out what you've done. Some people suggest doing done lists rather than to-do lists, so you can actually work out what you're doing in a day, and it's kind of more motivating. But it's just you're pretending to be effective, and you're not. You're just being busy. And that's science. Can't argue with it. Benjamin Franklin, I'd never heard of, but apparently achieved an awful lot. No, I'm joking. You may be familiar. Invented bifocal glasses, lightning rod. Chaired some universities, was president of a state, founded the United States or something like that. But he was actually one of the first day designers. We found in our research this beautiful thing, and it's in the book. If you can't read it, don't worry. He was obsessive about getting the most out of his day, as you would be when you achieved as much as he did. The amount of books he wrote. He was even chairman of a fire department somewhere. But he woke up at 5 in the morning. You'll notice as well that this is unencumbered by household chores, childcare, and commuting. But anyway, he'd get up at 5, he'd rise, wash, address powerful goodness, which I guess is kind of a religious thing, but I think it's also about kind of setting priorities and remembering what he's about. And you know, he'll wash, which is helpful, prosecute the present study, so a little bit of study, and then on to work. And work takes place in 2 4-hour blocks in the morning and the afternoon, which is, neuroscience shows, is very, very effective. Blocks of work focused on one thing. At lunchtime, he takes 2 hours for lunch, so he does have a massive break, and he also does some reading, overlooks his accounts, which is nice. Evening questions, he'll then ask at the end of the day, what has he done? What has he achieved? He'll review the day and be honest with himself. And I absolutely love, I actually have this as a tag in my to-do list now, this phrase he has in the evening, putting things in their places. Lovely. But there's actually neuroscience to back this up, that's a really, really good idea. If that light bulb needs replacing, if the pictures are slightly wonky, if the rubbish hasn't been taken out, all of those little jobs around the house that really you should have done, they actually create something called open loops, and that depletes energy. So you're spending energy on something that you're not even doing, cognitively speaking. I'm massively oversimplifying, and if there's any neuroscientists in the house, I'll be in trouble. But there are references for all of this. So, for instance, one of the things that we could see from thinking about all of this properly is waking up and doing something other than checking your email first thing. Who wakes up and checks their email first thing? Honestly, yeah, most people. If not, then who checks Twitter and Facebook first thing in the morning? Only 3 people. Liars! Doing something, it's a really, really bad thing to do, is to switch straight on and and try and find out what the world can do to you before you've decided what you're going to do to the world. But the science behind it is it increases allostatic load, it puts you on the back foot, it increases your anxiety levels, you're already spending energy on stuff that you haven't chosen to spend it on before you've even addressed powerful goodness and had your breakfast and, you know, bid your servants to do whatever. Knowing when to switch off is a really, really important thing. And I love the fact that Nokia, in terms of sponsoring and commissioning this research, has got, a mobile company has got behind the idea of, actually, it's, when you're looking at technology and mobile devices, it's not all about being connected 24/7, 365. It's not possible. It's not healthy. The important question is when you should be turning off in order to use it effectively. Using technology with purpose rather than just because it's there, just because you happen to be alive in 2013 and that's what all the cool kids are doing. So scheduling email time was one of the tips that came out of the workshops that was incredibly powerful, which is like saying, I do email at 11, 2, and 6. And outside of that, I do work that, you know, has value and pushes forward my agenda and priority. Being really good at email is a good qualification in some firms. Go and work there. I don't think it's really effective if you're trying to start a business, unless that business is answering email for someone. One of the other exercises that I'd urge you to try out that worked really, really well in the workshops that we did at Social Media Week and the kind of slightly longer ones afterwards was timelining what bad days and good days look like in terms of scheduling and putting technology in. And a lot of the things were, you know, obviously waking up and checking social media and email was one of the things that a lot of people said was a bad habit. And then having breaks in between, having schedules for email, all of those sorts of things. Don't take these as your templates, and they are in the book as well. Everything's in the book, which you're going to read. But just thinking through what your ideal day looks like, structuring it, prototyping it, and then iterating. And this is one of my colleagues did this picture of his. You wouldn't believe he's a qualified illustrator. The face over there. Yeah, funnily enough, he's a digital strategist now. But anyway, there we go. The one thing, and this is a David Rock's book, Your Brain at Work, if you want to delve into any of the neuroscience on this, is incredibly good, incredibly accessible. But one of the chapters in that, and one of the messages that we found was incredibly useful. And this has had a big impact on how we work at Brilliant Noise as well, just doing the research and couldn't help talking about it, sharing it with colleagues all of the time, was that our default, think about what your default activity is. You've got a few minutes. You're not sure what to be doing next. What do you do? Quite often people reach for email, and that then dictates what they do for the next 20 minutes. What we should have, and the most effective way of using our brain and that precious glucose, is to prioritize prioritizing. Is to say that if I've got some time, what I need to do is go back to think, am I achieving what I need to today? What are the things that would make a really difference? Oh, yeah, I'll tell you a story, a really, really good story from a book called Willpower by, I've forgotten it, but search for it on Amazon, name of the author, it's a psychologist as well. He went in to do a talk at the Pentagon to 50 top-ranking generals, only one of whom was a woman, interestingly. But I suppose not that interestingly, it's the military, high ranking, whatever. But, and he asked them all to articulate in 50 words at the beginning of the session how they prioritized their day and made their choices about what to do or what not to do. And he said it stumped them, and a lot of them got furious, and they, well, you know, you kind of do stuff. The author said that the only person who came up with a coherent reply was the female general, and her approach to prioritization was, I write a long list of all of the things that need to be done, and then I cross off everything after number 2. We do this now on a Monday in my company. We do it, say, what are your 2 priorities for the week? And there's always an argument. I've got 4. No, but what are the 2 that are actually going to happen? What are the 2 that, if nothing else happens, you're going to get done by the end of the week? And one of them can't be clearing my email inbox. No. Anyway, you get the idea about email. Prioritizing. If we can get into the habit of thinking about priorities rather than going straight to something distracting. We'll be doing more on this subject, so I just urge you to read the book. The next topic we've got coming up, which is called Mobile Mastery, it's going to be addressing a lot more actually using tools and how we use social tools to be more productive, not just to enhance our reputation or get out there or distract ourselves. So that's coming along very shortly. It's the second book. But in the meantime, take some books, read some books, and do follow this program, that Nokia at Work, you can also download the ebook if you aren't fortunate enough to grab one of the copies on the way out. I think we've got maybe 2 minutes for questions.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I'm just standing here awkwardly.
Yeah. Stop. Thank you. Are there any questions?
Hands up if you checked your email during that presentation.
Yeah, and Facebook, right, yeah, thanks. I'm checking that while I'm answering this question.
Here.
Your Brain at Work by Dr. David Rock. And Willpower as well is another one that's excellent. But Your Brain at Work is the most practical one. It just goes through a day, looks at situations that have gone wrong in the workplace, like a meeting that goes poorly, a conference call that goes poorly, and shows the neuroscience behind that, and then replays it in a more positive way, which is really practical.
Question?
For the purposes of implementing some of these strategies, is there any research that you've come across into the actual process of changing habits?
Can you repeat the question?
Oh, yeah. Have you come across any research on changing habits? Yes, we came across a lot. It's one of the things I didn't have time to talk about. Habit is, and turning good things into habits is one of the best ways that you can reduce cognitive load. If something's a habit, you don't spend glucose on it. It just happens. Think of brushing your teeth, your routine in the morning. You don't think about that. It just kind of happens because you've made it into a habit. Habits are incredibly hard to break. I think there's a book called Habit that's quite good on this subject, but habits are really, really hard to break. We sometimes describe people as habit machines. But the neuroscientists and the neuroscience experts we spoke to about habits said that the most effective strategy is to grow a new habit. So don't talk about giving something up. Grow a new habit to displace it. So, for instance, in one of our workshops, someone talked about how they'd realized that email reading first thing in the morning was a bad habit. So rather than trying to break that habit, because how are you going to stand a chance? You haven't even woken up and it's your habit. They grew a new one, which was that they kept an Evernote folder with things that they wanted to read but they hadn't had a chance to read, so longer kind of articles, reports. And they got into the habit of reading that in the morning instead and making that their habit. And you hear of other examples like around, like, you know, if you're giving up smoking, then take up exercise or do something else that fills the gap. But, yeah.
One more question. 2 more questions.
Can you talk about some of the impacts that you've seen of shifting your day, planning your day this way, from your own experience or organization?
Well, I can only really speak from personal experience and from the experience of the company. But it's been incredibly de-stressing to understand that some of the things that you wanted to do or thought you should do or you'd heard suggested before actually have science behind it. Now, that might not work for everyone, but for us, I don't know, we're quite analytical. It really helps to have that evidence to go, no, we have to do it in this way. And the more you read about it, the more you find out about these different ways of working, and team collaboration is one of the things we'll be addressing later in the year. But there are little things that make life so much less stressful. One of the habits that we came across was called declaring technology. We evolved this, which is when you're in a meeting, we all sit with our laptops open, and you don't know who's on email or not. But we know that we shouldn't be on email because it's multitasking. You either be in the meeting or have a shorter meeting or don't have the meeting. You know. So we got into this habit of declaring technology. We'd say what we were using in the meeting and what we were going to be doing before the meeting started. So I'll be using Evernote, and if anything interesting comes up, I'll be Googling it just to cross-check and fact-check it. I'm not doing email, I'm not doing Twitter, I'm not keeping an eye on the client's social media account in the meantime. And it really relaxes everyone, because suddenly nobody's trying, because we're humans, we're mind readers, we want to know what each other are doing. But if we're not sure, then we're always kind of second guessing, and actually everybody kind of drifts out of the meeting, like one of those conference calls where you say, Brian? And Brian goes, oh, sorry, I zoned out for a few minutes there. Oh, what was the point of being on the call, Brian?
Was Brian American?
Yes.
Oh, okay, just checking the answer.
It was that Brian. Yes. So it's incredibly de-stressing. The most powerful thing that we've found about it in a team is talking about it and talking about how we're trying to change and be more productive. And it just kind of, one of the things that Caroline Webb says, and she's written a lot in The Economist and Management Today and around this, is it's a kind of a leadership issue as well. Because if you want to change your email habits and the CEO expects a reply to the emails at 6 in the morning that he sent at 4 in the mornings, things won't change. That will be the culture. So it kind of has to be a...
Team, don't listen to him. Okay, that'd be great. Thanks very much. All right, I think we're out of time.
Okay, brilliant.
Please join me in thanking you. That was awesome.